Hello, hello. Welcome to Greet the Week on January the 14th of a new year. Hopefully that you're doing good with your resolutions or making some revisions or whatever. And today we're going to be talking about listening. And sometimes we need to listen to ourselves as well as listening to others. So Jan has chosen our topic. So Jan, you want to start it off?
Yes, I was just thinking the other day about relationships and how to make better relationships and to keep things more pleasant around the house. And I started thinking about listening. That is one of the caring or connecting habits that Dr. Glasser told us about. But I think it's one of the more important ones. We might think that we're listening, but if we pay attention to our conversation, maybe we could do a better job than what we're doing. And I started paying attention to some conversations and noticing different patterns that are going on. Like you can see two people talking back and forth, but they're really not listening to each other. One is saying what they have, how their day was going, and the other was saying how their day was going, and they're just kind of taking turns talking. But it's not really listening to each other. It's like I'm doing my data dump. What happened today? And I do my little thing, and you do your little thing.
Kind of like individual monologues.
Yes, exactly, which I think is kind of interesting. And then you also have another thing that I really notice, because I do counseling, and there's a lot of times something comes up in my mind. I go, no, I can't bring them up. This is about them. This is not about me. I don't need to share my experiences.
Well, sometimes we do. Sometimes it's really connecting.
Sometimes you do, absolutely. Sometimes you do. But
the thing of it is that whenever you do need to, share one of those things, it's kind of to ask permission for, so that they will tune into what you're talking about rather than the fact that I'm just disregarding what you have said.
Right, because it's relevant to the conversation. I guess that's one thing to think about. Is what I'm saying, am I saying it because it's relevant to the conversation? I have a point that I want to make, or am I saying it just because, oh, you did that? Well, yeah, I did that too. And there's a need for me to get attention, to talk about, to show that I've done the same thing that you've done. And so I think with listening, it's, to pay attention to, am I really listening to what this person has to say? Or am I interjecting just to talk?
Right. And then it's always, not only is it listening to the other person, but it's listening to ourselves and listening to the reasons that we're wanting to interject those things.
Yeah.
Is it to, whether it's something we're saying or something we're following up on? Is it wanting to give consensus to, as though that really matters? Right. If enough people agree with me, then it must be A-okay. And that's not necessarily the thing. Or are we wanting to interject as a way of giving them a different point of view?
Yeah, that's relevant to the conversation. And we're having a discussion about, are we having a discussion about just some topic in general? Or is somebody trying to want somebody to listen to them about their day because they're troubled about something? So is the conversation about helping the other person or giving the person some space, or is it about we're having a lively conversation and whatever goes? So I guess you really also need to keep in mind, what kind of a conversation are we having here?
Right. And yeah. And is it to be dismissive, or is it to be a conversation?
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I say quite frequently is that if you think communication is all talking, you haven't been listening.
Right.
Because it's imperative that we listen. Whenever I was teaching at Lackland Air Force Base a few weeks ago, and they were learning, to interact and make the client feel welcome and so forth. And so it was a group demonstration that anyone could, speak up and ask a question or make a comment as they saw fit. And anyway, so they were getting kind of bogged down. And I said, okay, let's take a break here. And let's go back. Whenever this client came in to talk with you, what was the very first thing that he said?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, he's talking about he was upset with this and he was upset with something else. And I said, but what was one of the things that he brought out? And he had started off by, saying he was dumping all of his problems. But then he also, in the process of dumping all of his problems, he said, it's just so unfair.
Okay.
And sometimes you need to just zero in on, let's go back and say, I think I heard you say about something being unfair. And then help them to self-evaluate as to what's so unfair about it and why do you see it as unfair.
Yeah, yeah.
And then maybe as we can really listen to them, we could help them to get another perspective, only if they're willing to receive that.
Yes, because those kinds of things are really powerful to listen to, because people talk a lot and say things, but maybe they're just kind of going around what's really happening, where they gave you a lot of information saying that that's unfair. So obviously something's bothering them, and maybe they're uncomfortable talking about exactly what they think is unfair, and they talk about all this other stuff. So can you pull away the peripheral stuff that's going on and get to, well, what did you really mean by this unfair statement? All this other stuff you've been saying, does that contribute to it, or are we getting to what you really want to talk about?
Right. And kind of lead the conversation without, it's always, and to listen slowly, to just really hear, to actually, it goes back to everything that we do. We have to kind of want to engage with the person, want to listen to what they had to say, realize that what they are saying there's always, in any conversation, there's two speakers. And for one to be speaking, you kind of assume that the other person's going to want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And to hear what is said, and then to respond to what has been said, and to listen to the emotions behind it also.
Yeah. And then if you're the person who wants somebody to listen to you and you feel like the other person isn't, there's nothing wrong with stepping back and saying, this is really important to me. I need someone to talk to about it. Because sometimes, and I find myself doing this, I get upset because they're not really listening to me, and they're talking about their stuff. And but it's your responsibility to say, hey, I came here to talk to you because I have something important I want to talk about. And there's nothing wrong with saying, would you please give me some time to get this all out, and and I want some insight from you, or I just need someone to listen to me, or let the other person know what you are expecting.
So it's okay to ask permission to be heard.
Yeah.
And then is it okay to ask the person, are you up to that? Are you willing to
see if now's a good time to do that, because they may have had a bad day and aren't really in the mood to listen to somebody else's bad day, especially if it involves what that person is doing.
So then can it be set for another time?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, that's the thing too, is to be respectful of the person. I mean, if you really don't want to spend the time right now listening to it, if you're distracted by something else, is to let them know that it is important to you, that you want them to be able to talk to you, and but let's find another time, instead of just blowing off. No, now's not a good time. Well, when will be? So because I really want to talk about this. So let's another time. That'll be good.
So, whenever you are sharing your story, or your, something that you want to share with someone and they're not listening to you, how do you handle it?
Well, I mean, there's, I mean, you could be real upfront and say, hey, I don't feel like you're listening to me. I mean, it just really, really depends on the situation. But you feel uncomfortable saying that, to tell somebody, I really don't think you're listening to me and this is important. But I think you just have to be courteous when you say that. But there's nothing wrong with letting them know that you want someone to listen to you right now, and I don't feel like I have all your attention. I guess it goes back then to asking them permission if it's okay to dump on them right now, because sometimes if people aren't listening to you, they're really not ready. They might be preoccupied themselves and not want all this. I don't need all this right now.
Right. Well, I know myself personally. I have, 3 or 4 people in mind that occasionally I'll be trying to say something and they just kind of butt in or what, and I just drop it.
Yeah.
And it's not a hateful, ugly, in your face. It's just that obviously you're not listening, or maybe you don't even want to, and it's okay, and I'll be okay with that. But if we can't be okay with it, then it definitely needs to be broached.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Well, just so that our emotions in the dropping it. See, there's a big difference in ignoring something and in overlooking it.
Yes.
And so we don't want to harm or put any hindrance in that relationship with that person that we really do value. We just don't want to hear them right now.
Right.
Or maybe they don't want to hear you right now.
Yeah. And that happens. I mean, even in good relationships, there are times when you don't want to hear what the other person has to say at that moment.
Right.
And that's where being honest with each other and letting somebody know, I really care about you, but now is just not a good time for me to listen to what you have to say. And again, let's talk about this in the morning, or let's go to lunch tomorrow, or something.
Right. And it's also realizing that we are mirrors for other people and they are mirrors for us.
Yeah.
And so as we can look and see how they are responding, that's going to give us a clue whether to go ahead and speak or whether to back off, whether to go in another direction, as we can begin to listen to those mirror images that they're giving to us and we are giving to them.
Mm-hmm. I'm not a Mac user, so I don't know how to copy this.
Did somebody say something? I didn't quite catch that.
No, ma'am. We were having some technical difficulties. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
And it's also looking at the mask that we may wear.
Yes.
There might be 3 different contexts for listening. One, in which you're listening and you disagree with the other person. 2, you're listening and you agree with the other person. And 3, you're listening and you're kind of indifferent to the subject. And each of those 3 different contexts usually have different responses when it comes to listening. Do you understand what I'm saying? Are you listening?
Yes.
Yeah, I hear you, Jerry. And so that goes back to the fact that we need to listen to ourselves and first of all, because we've got these thoughts going through our mind, and, we need to sometimes censor ourselves as to how we're going to respond to that indifference. And is it going to be a response that is drawing us closer together, or is it going to be one that's pushing us further apart?
Right. And that's with, well, I guess it could be with all conversations, but especially the people who are important to us, that we want to make sure that we're not pushing them away. Mm-hmm. and be aware of that as especially for disagreeing with something that they have to say.
Right.
That's
the challenge, though, isn't it? That's what I find, is that if I disagree with someone, I have to really work to not be formulating my response to what they're saying while I'm listening to them.
Yeah.
Because it really interferes. It's the same reason when I go and take a break and watch a TED Talk, I hit random. And I stumble over things I have no agreement with, but I watch them because you have to learn to. If you can't listen to the people you disagree with, then you're really not listening.
Yeah,
it's easy to say, yeah, sure, yeah, you're somebody you absolutely agree with, but and the other thing is you never learn anything that way either.
Exactly. And I think it's good to listen to people who have opposing views because you get different perspectives. Because if you're only talking to people who agree with you, you're just seeing one side of the story.
Yeah.
And you might, somebody on the other side may have a good point that you hadn't really considered before.
Yeah.
No, that's a real good, but sometimes it's hard to listen to it. But after you hear it and you think about it, well, maybe there is something to that, but it helps us to open up.
Yeah.
Because all they're doing is giving information.
Correct.
And as we can take that information without being so either wanting to agree with it or wanting to disagree with it. We have an Amber Alert coming on over here on the cell phone. So,
his house is on fire.
What about? Let's talk about those that maybe ask for advice, but they don't really want the advice.
If they ask for it, and then you start down the path that they don't want to hear, then it's tough. I remember my dad once told me, "Don't ever ask a question that you really don't want the answer to."
Exactly.
But sometimes we do need to hear that other side, because our brains can really play tricks with us and get us to think that this direction that we're going is the right way to go, and have all kinds of rationalizations and reasons to go that way. And somebody might say, you want to think about that a little bit more before you do it? And you don't want somebody to stop you. You want to go down that direction, but sometimes we do need to hear that opposing voice, that advice that really isn't telling us, yeah, that's great what you're doing.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that is kind of my go-to is they really don't want my advice.
Yeah, right.
And even if I gave the most sage advice in the world, if they don't, they won't take it because they've already gotten their
mind.
Gotten their mind made up. So I want to begin to explore, well, what are your thoughts on solving this problem? What have you thought about doing? And, why are you coming to me? I ask my clients quite frequently, what do you want from me?
Mm-hmm.
And probably 9 times out of 10, the answer is nothing.
Right.
Because they're just wanting a sounding board that they can hear themselves sound. And sometimes I ask them, let me tell you what I think you may be wanting. You may be wanting someone to agree with you so you can go ahead and do what you're going to do anyway.
Or to give you permission.
Right, to give you permission. So let's be honest with that. Let's just be honest right up front. And even if I do give you permission, that doesn't mean you'll do it. Even if I give you a warning, that doesn't mean you'll heed it. So it is realizing that we just need sometimes somebody to unload on so that we can hear ourselves unloading. And ask ourselves, am I capable of being in that position? Am I willing to be? And can I be so without passing a judgment on this person? Greg Braden is one of my favorite authors, and he was talking about, how that people are mirror images of us, and that all too often, whenever we are judging them, until we really become aware of the fact that we're judging them, what we're doing is we're judging something about ourselves.
Yeah.
But we want to place it on them, and if they had just fixed it, then everything would be okay.
Yeah. And those things that bring up emotions inside of us is usually because there's something about us that we're not comfortable with, we're unhappy with.
Right. And as we can look at the fact that even though, with TED Talks or whatever, the Mona and Jan discussions, the whatever, that if we're not in agreement with that, all they're giving is information. And so that information in and of itself is benign.
Right. Yeah.
It's how we take it. It's how we use it. That it can either become healing or it can become a toxicity.
Yeah.
And so it's listening as much as we possibly can, and it takes a lot of concentrated effort to just hear the words and to hear where that person is coming from.
And not to pass judgment, or not to try to decide what their intent is.
Right.
Decide.
Right. Without mind reading.
Yeah.
Not that,
right.
you know, with the human fallibility in you know, words. I love words. And the Merriam-Webster word of the day, I don't know if it was the word of the day. I just pulled it up today, okay?
Okay.
Because I have a whole lot on there that's not necessarily today. And it was mea culpa.
Okay.
And, you know, you're familiar with that. I'm sure everyone is. That the mea culpa is basically saying my wrong. You know, I see the error of my way. But then, as in Merriam-Webster, they're always going deeper, deeper, deeper. And so one of the things was Felix Cooper, and I may be mispronouncing, Felix, and that it is going back to the origin of humanity, or at least the story behind the origin of humanity, and the fact that we started off making all kinds of errors, and that Felix Cooper is a way of saying, you know what, I'm just as human as you are.
Yeah.
And it's a flaw that's within me, and I'm seeing it in you, and I'm a little upset with it in you, but I realize if it wasn't in me, I wouldn't be upset with it in you. And it's realizing that and monitoring our tone of voice and monitoring our expressions, not only the words we say.
Oh, yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because I don't realize that I make a lot of expressions, and I have people look at me and go, well, what's that for? I'm like, what? Well, just the way you looked at me, the way that you sighed, and I don't have any idea that I did it, but I guess I'm very expressive, and I don't really realize all my body language, what's going on. But I have had people I had somebody once get really angry at me. We were in a fairly heated discussion to begin with, and I made one of my or something.
Yeah.
And she just reamed me. I'm like, no, wait. I'm
Yeah.
I don't mean it in a bad way. I'm just thinking about how much work it's going to take to change this or redo this. It's not a reflection on you, but oh my goodness, she thought that it was. But we do that, and we don't really realize how we're communicating and what we're saying to
right.
But depending upon what's in the back of your mind, and she may not have liked me, and by my not agreeing with her or something, it just set her off. And but it's kind of funny, and it's good to start being aware of those types of things.
Being aware of that.
Noticing what you're doing and how you're coming across, because those are messages. And the other person, that's another way of listening, is by watching.
Right. And our nonverbals, I mean, we read them in others and they read them in us. And they send messages. And not only is it the facial expressions, it's the way we carry ourselves. It's the way we breath. It's, it's whether we're Kemp or not. There's many, many things that whether we want to blame it on something else or not, it's the fact that, it's just part of being human. And that's not to make an excuse, it's to become aware of.
Right.
It's to become conscious of the fact that they're coming at me again, to try to get me to change my mind. Or that they're coming, and not try to I find that, especially with some family members, I have a tendency to tune out all too often. And it is just giving the respect of not tuning out, even if it's something that I've heard it before.
Right. And so how do you respond to somebody who has told you something for the third or fourth time, and you really don't want to hear it anymore? What do you do?
Right. What do I do? Well, with my sister,
It's different for different people, huh?
Right. Depends on who the person. But with my sister, I'll just kind of give, I get, well, she can read me too. And she says, have I told you this before? And I'll usually say something. But, that we have gotten to the place that it can be not down-putting, but it can be, I said, oh, only about 5 times. And she said, well, okay, I'll go somewhere else. But I was with a friend the other day, and whenever I called her to make our dinner date, she told me some information. And so then when we were sitting at the dinner table, she told me the same information. And I mean, it was verbatim.
Yeah.
What I just listened to it with grace.
Right. Yeah.
But I really had to summons grace. I had to get deep down inside and summons that grace.
Yeah.
And the same thing with, with my husband.
Right.
And just comments about various things, that it's basically the same conversation again and again. And I have to really dig deep down inside to summons that grace, to be gracious, and to realize, or to attempt to realize, that their motive is not to irritate me.
Right. It's not. It's not. Yeah. So sometimes it's for attention, that there's something they really are proud of, or something, and want to say it again. But
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I realized that there are times that, I'm sorry, Jerry, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think that sometimes it's okay to talk about the same subject more than once.
Oh, sure.
I have a friend, and she's very bright. She's a good friend, and I like her. We get along great. But sometimes I'll bring up something. She'll say, "Oh, we already talked about that." And my reaction is, "Well, you mean we can only talk about something one time? So what? Maybe
I have more information.
Yeah, maybe there's.
I want more information.
Yeah, maybe there's more that can happen in our conversation that will enlarge the subject a bit."
Yeah. Well, I think there's a difference. Go ahead.
And people that try to limit a conversation to only one time, I think they're really missing the point. That that's we're human beings, and so what? I mean, maybe there's more to it than what we discussed the first time, or the second, or third, or fourth time.
And so, Jerry, in situations like that, I mean, it comes back to rest on you. So how do you respond to that? Do you say to her as graciously as you did to us?
Was that gracious what I said to you? I say the same thing. I say, so what? Can't we talk about something more than once?
Okay. And so they may not see it as being gracious, huh?
They may not. Yeah.
Right.
Usually gets upset.
Between like having a topic of discussion, like of some general policies and things that are going on, and you talk about it, and you have new information, talk about it again, and the person who tells you the same story about her niece that did this, and the same old story that you hear over and over and over again. And those are the ones that, to me, it's like, yeah, I already heard that story. Yes, I already know about this person that.
Right.
And those are the ones that I'm talking about. But with topics of discussion, of general items of conflict and stuff, sometimes you have to talk about it several times, and bring in new information. Not if you're rehashing the whole thing and just going back and forth about, well, you're wrong and I'm right, but you're bringing in new information and new ideas, and reopen the topic, or you didn't come to any resolution before, and so now let's talk about it again and see if we can.
But very often, the new information has to be assessed to see if it's valid or not.
Yes.
Sometimes, very often, I see it more and more these days, that invalid information comes into the conversation and contributes to the opinion of the people.
Invalid from whose point of view?
Well, no, wait a minute. Wait, stop. It's not a matter of anybody's point of view. Either something,
really?
either there's a matter of it's true or it isn't true. And it doesn't matter about the point of view. You can have a point of view, and your point of view doesn't necessarily make it valid or true.
Exactly.
There's a lot of points of view that are invalid. A
But there's
lot.
a lot of,
Maybe so, maybe not.
there's a lot of information that
No,
comes.
I'll go to my deathbed believing that. There's no
Okay.
maybe not. There's a lot of invalid points of view.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of information that we're bombarded with these days that
Yes.
isn't backed by facts.
Yes. Thank you.
It's true. I mean, it's not really a point of view. It's somebody saying this is fact, and there's been a study. I mean, there's all ways to look at scientific studies that have been run too, that that you're coming to this conclusion. But if you really look at the data, you shouldn't be coming to that conclusion because it's
That's
not
right.
but it's difficult to get to that. And if you read about something that says, well, there's a study that says this, and it's something you want to believe, then you're going to say this is true, and because I want to believe this.
Well, and my CPA told me one time, well, he wasn't a CPA, but he was a number cruncher. And I was wanting a report on, people attending classes and this and so forth. And he says, well, what do you want it to say? I said, I want it to say what it says. He says, no. He said, have it say anything you want it to say.
Well,
that's the problem.
Yeah.
And it goes back to Dr. Glasser and the fact that everything we see is from our point of view. Whatever we want to call it, a perception, it's still from our point of view. And to us, it becomes our reality because, hey, I can see, I can hear, I can this, I can that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it may be very, very valid to that person and totally invalid to us, but the person is not invalid. The person has worth and value.
I wish you could see how high my eyes are rolling.
I kind of
I was kind
and
of.
I love you anyway, Jerry.
I was educated a long, long time ago with the scientific outlook of objectivity. Science is man's way of, or humanity's way of trying to find the truth of the way the universe, the way nature works. That's what science does. It's objective. I'm talking about objective truth, not subjective truth. Subjective truth is sometimes just BS. Sometimes it is. And unfortunately, these days.
And BS happens. And it's a real object.
Well, it may be, but it's not. When you step in it, you want to get rid of it too. Right? It's not. We should not be operating on BS opinions, subjective opinions. Oh, it's my point of view. Well, you got to find out whether it's valid or not, whether it's true or not. Science looks for truth, not opinions. And that's what we need to start looking more at, the scientific principles, or scientific way of evaluating the way things really work, not somebody's opinion.
And science is giving some kind of proof that is backing up faith traditions from time immemorial.
Well,
that was just.
Well, sure. You can pay a scientist $1 million to say something, and a lot of them will. So yeah, sometimes science has been corrupted also. Yes. Sometimes that's not real science. That's corrupted science. That's not real, truthful, seeking, objective science.
Well, I think we're getting off the topic here, and we're running out of time right now. So we can talk about this after we stop the recording if you want to continue on this conversation. But we're out of time for today, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I appreciate all of you, and we'll see you again next week on Greet the Week.
So long.
Bye-bye.